Hi everyone, welcome back to Sparkle on Substack with me, Claire Venus. I'm so delighted to be meeting with Sarah Robertson today, and Sarah and I are going to talk about all things Substack, crowdfunding and branding. It's going to be a lovely cozy conversation. I'm joining you from my cupboard, my utility room cupboard. So the laundry is off, the piles are this way, and hopefully it's not too distracting. But I always think it's really nice to do video, and just because I couldn't use the studio, I just thought, well, that's no excuse. So if you're watching, that's where I am. I have recorded one in here before, and the sound quality is okay. So fingers crossed it goes well. Hi, Sarah, welcome.
Hi, Claire. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. It's so nice to connect. And we have connected on Zoom a couple of times. So Sarah and I have never met in real life, but we have met in internet life. So that's been really nice.
Yeah, I think we've been chatting for, it'll be nearly 2 years now, because I think it was the end of 2022 that I started to kind of look at Substack. It was on my radar, and yeah, started to look a little bit more closely at what it might do for me, if it could be part of my kind of ecosystem around my business. And then I think we got chatting on Zoom in early 2023, I want to say, because yes, I was
Mm.
like heavily pregnant at that point. And yeah, just thinking about what was next for me. So yeah, you helped me kind of strategize and decide on those next steps.
Next steps for Substack. Yeah, it's really nice to rewind and then be here today and kind of be reflecting on where you've grown your Substack, what it's ended up being in terms of its identity as well. So when you first came to me, I'd really love to just kind of track back because for work, you're a designer, aren't you? You're a brand expert and you do all that sort of gorgeous work in the world. And I suppose as part of your creative ecosystem, you were questioning whether Substack could be a good place. And I guess people are always interested in, well, why Substack? So why Substack as well as Instagram? Why Substack as well as a mailing list? So I'd love to know, well, first of all, you can introduce us to your business, but then why
Mhm.
Substack was kind of piquing your interest and why you thought it might be a good place to arrive to.
Yeah, sure. So I run a branding and design studio called These Are the Days, and the core services I offer to clients are brand identity design. I also offer creative mentoring, and that's usually focused on brand strategy, styling, or storytelling, whatever the client's particular needs or challenges are. And I also do play days where I kind of work with clients for a full day. So maybe they want to dive into a particular problem they have, or they want to work together on a color palette or their kind of messaging for their storytelling. So those are quite focused, intensive days that I work on. So that's kind of whistle stop tour around These Are the Days. When it came to Substack, my my feeling was that I wanted to really kind of explore writing a bit more, because for me, I really love the design work I do. I enjoy my design practice, but I felt like there wasn't much room for writing within that. I was doing a lot of blogging, sending a lot of newsletters, finding that I was getting some traction. But what attracted me to Substack was that for me, it was like blogging, but it is living beyond that initial hitting of publish. Like the blogs on my website are great for SEO, but nobody's really congregating around them or having a conversation around them. What I really like about Substack is that I can share something and occasionally have conversations within the comments below or within notes, which was introduced, I think, just after I joined. And yeah, I've just found it a really helpful place to be in terms of connecting with people, building that community around the writing I do. And that can be anything from kind of branding related posts right through to writing about creativity, motherhood and balancing that with business. So I do cover a range of topics for all subscribers. And then for paid subscribers, go a little bit deeper on the branding side and share resources each quarter. Um, it wasn't until I was about to launch my Substack that I think I settled on the name Brand Seasons. And, the reason for that really was around kind of a love of nature as well as creativity and wanting to kind of blend the two. And I think also kind of drawing on kind of inspiration from the seasons in terms of just pacing, living and working in a way that was more sustainable. So yeah, the name Brand Seasons, I kind of felt enabled me to kind of touch on not just what I do for a living, but also how I want to live, how I want to work, and try and kind of like bring all those things together.
Yeah, fascinating. And I feel like because I worked with you on the design of what you wanted your Substack to be, but then also as a reader and then a paid subscriber. So I paid for Sarah's Substack as soon as she launched that paid offering because it was just a no-brainer for me. So where I see Sarah's expertise is this beautiful place that I can land. And I think is your strapline crafting brands that feel like home. It'll be wild if I've remembered that. Is that what it is?
Yeah, yeah, craft
Mm-hmm.
a brand that feels like home is
Mm.
my kind of business tagline, but I use it again and again in my writing on my Substack as well.
And so
So
that
I'm
felt
glad you
like a
remembered that.
real, yeah, and it felt like a real invitation and also space to set an intention because with Sparkle, the energy of starting that publication was just, well, it was just ferocious. Like I was like, oh my goodness, like this is asking to be born. I just need to make a thing. I need to make a home. And I just had this very clear vision that it was going to take a year to get it to a place where people would be able to arrive and find the things that they needed to find. But within that time, I was leaning into, but what is the branding saying? Like, what is my brand? What is the design of the Substack? Like, how does that enable people to feel connected? Is it confusing? Is it putting people off? So for me, it's been really beautiful to follow your journey and also have that gentle reminder that sometimes, it takes a while to make a home. It takes a little while to bed in. And I feel like sometimes people can kind of come to branding and be like, okay, I need my branding. And I hear this a lot when people want to start a Substack. I can't start a Substack without my branding, but I don't know what my branding is. And your process enables them to go deeper into them understanding what it could be. And I guess kind of gets them into that space of questioning because we can't really pluck a brand from thin air. Like that would be a very difficult thing, wouldn't it? So yeah, I guess just leading people into that space of going, it could take some time to make your Substack home. Yes, you could definitely work with a branding person from the off, but you could also lean into what your words are asking of you and then circle back and do some work, join your paid community or whatever else it is. I mean, what do you see with people that you've supported on Substack? Do they come to you to kind of help them with branding off Substack and on? Like, I know you've done a bit of work
Hmm.
recently. I'd be fascinated to know.
Hmm. So I've got, well, there's a couple of different approaches that clients have taken. So I've got a couple who I've worked with on branding projects outside Substack, so supporting them with their business and their websites and their social media presence. And then they've come to me and said, I'm really interested in launching a Substack. So one client in particular wanted Substack to be the home of her podcast. So, we came up with a name for it. We worked on her identity, and she didn't launch until she had all the kind of nuts and bolts in place. I think for her, she just felt she really needed that before she launched. And it was easy for her to put that in place because we'd already done the kind of branding work together. Um, so I then had a client come to me who has been on Substack for some time, a couple of years, and wanted to work together on rebranding her Substack from a design perspective. So retaining the name, but she, over the course of a few years, had become clearer on what her vision for Substack was and wanted to then make that investment. But she's had, yeah, at least a couple of years of writing on the platform first and really just finding her feet. And that's my advice to anyone who's not starting because of it, is to really just dive in and begin to play with the space and figure out what it feels like for them, what it means for them to be there, and that's, from my perspective, a kind of, I don't know, a more empowering way to approach it, because it's likely that after a year or two, you're going to start to want to make changes. It's not a fixed thing. It's not like you create a brand, it's there and it's done. It's a moving feast. It's something that, you do need to keep tending to. It's not a one and done thing. And I think that's why just starting is really important, because then you can spend time, building those blocks and getting familiar with your audience, what they want from you. And yeah, just over time start to get a feel for how your space could look, and yeah, how you will approach Substack from a strategic perspective as well, because of course there's lots of decisions to make beyond just how it looks. um
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And sometimes the words can flow out of what the brand identity is as well. Like they can be intermixed, can't they? So like when you talk about that kind of seasonal connection, like I really get that from your color palette. I feel like, yeah, I get that. Like that connects the brand seasons, but also just the way that the colors, I guess, speak to me. I just feel like I'm in nature and I feel like I'm at home. And I know those two things are quite different, but it's quite reassuring, to be honest. I just feel like, yeah, when I land here, I know exactly where I am. And part of it, because Substack started moving a little bit more quickly, part of this brand identity is us demonstrating, yes, this is me. Like you've arrived, you're getting an email from Claire or you're getting an email from Sarah. And some of that just takes a little bit of time to build with our audience. But I know in the past, when I'd subscribe to somebody, and I'm kind of at my limit with subscribes now, but I'd subscribe to somebody and I'd be like, who's this again? What am I reading? And then that gentle kind of reintroduction of self, reintroduction of brand is actually something that I teach now, because people can then just remind everybody who they are in the world and what their Substack's about, what they're here to do. So there's lots of little subtle things that maybe we just haven't quite noticed, or we don't notice unless we're kind of giving it some extra thought. But I know that, in the olden days of Substack, a piece would just land, right? And it wasn't branded, it was Substack style. And then we would, at the bottom, we might get a sign off, but sometimes we didn't even use to get a sign off and people would miss their author name off. So all
Mhm.
of those things were just like a magical mystery tour of whose Substack I was receiving. Whereas now people are leaning more into reintroducing themselves, building community in the comments, bringing in those brand elements, whether that's on the Substack website itself or whether they're kind of working in page breaks in a visual way. There's kind of lots of little things that I've seen probably over the last year, to be honest. I think before then we weren't really seeing so much of that. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's been a real movement towards people styling up their Substacks more and just trying to set them apart from others. Certainly, like with my Substack, it's quite simple. I would say it's more image led, actually, like photos rather than, say, like design elements. Like I do bring design elements in and use aspects of my logo as page breaks, just really, really simple. A little bit of color here and there, but a lot of my kind of visual identity centers on the photography that I use, because I invested in some brand photography. That's something I was able to do a few years ago, and I have, used that an awful lot. I use it on my Substack, my emails, and my Substack, my sort of Instagram rather. So I've used it in a few different places. For me, um, imagery is an important thing, but I don't think you have to do brand photography for it to be accessible. You can find a certain style of image that you like, say on a free image platform, and then you can start that way, and that's a really helpful approach, I think, in terms of finding your style, because some people start and don't really know what they want things to look like. They're thinking too far ahead. What do other people want to see? And I think just start from a place of, well, actually, what am I called to add to this post as part of this piece of writing I'm doing? What's going to support it? And that might be something illustrative or graphic or might be a photograph of nature or something indoors, whatever is going to appeal. And I do notice people just kind of getting going with that, and then over time they start to kind of build a bit of an identity. And I see some people now actually using a lot of AI generated images on their publication, actually, and kind of like repeating that process. It's not something I personally use, but it's been interesting to me to see how some people have made that their thing. And that sort of brings a level of kind of like congruency to it all, and kind of brings it all together, so that there is that kind of I suppose a theme coming through. And I think that's what can make the space feel more like home. When you have that kind of repetition of elements or language or colors, that's really what makes a space feel like its own, and I think can then help people identify with it quite quickly as well. So you were saying about, I think you're now able to kind of, see what's coming from who based on the kind of styling elements that are being used now, whereas a few years ago, not so much.
Yeah, I think it's quite nice as well that we can kind of lean into being playful around that and then stand back and have a look. And for the people that are short on time, of course, Unsplash is plugged in, and that is a wonderful thing. I remember when I had a WordPress blog and I didn't know how to get images from the internet. I was taking my own on like my really rubbish iPhone and kind of uploading them, and it was time consuming and it would break often and all that sort of thing. And Substack enables us to, I could just search lock and key pink background or something. Like I try and bring in some gold and pink into a lot of the posts that I put out, just so it keeps that congruence of my branding, and something might pop up, there might be something in there. So I really like doing that. I like that the photographers are credited on there as well, so I always leave the credits on so that people can kind of link back to who took those photos. But yeah, it is interesting to just kind of lean into how it all builds over time, because when you go onto your Substack website, a lot of the time when I'm doing an audit, it'll end up being a very eclectic mix of things, because people are still trying to find their voice and they're just picking whichever image either springs to mind, what they've got handy on their desktop, or kind of searching things in Unsplash. I think the thing with Unsplash is that you can see Substacks with like repeat images from there. So if people have searched the same search term or they've seen something that they like, and I would always push to just try, if you can, to have more of a unique palette, but also be inviting people in with a unique photograph, your own photos if you can, or a brand photo shoot, because it can just really add that extra element of professionalism, but also really connect people to yours being something unique. I think with the AI thing, I mean, God, we could probably podcast all day about AI and AI imagery. For me, I'm still wrapping my head around if I like it or I don't. Like sometimes I feel like it's quite Alice in Wonderland. Other times I feel like I don't like it because I want to see like the real authentic person sat in a cupboard like I am today, like, so it's taken me too far away from like the humanity of it all. Other times I think, oh, it's playful, like it's hard, isn't it? And it's not something that I'm particularly called to use, but I feel like maybe, around vision boarding, it could be quite good, quite a nice tool, to kind of go, okay, like give me a house nestled between two mountains or something like that. I don't know. So yeah, interesting that you've spotted it as well.
Yeah. I've just seen a couple of publications use it, one with every post that they submit. And I think it kind of works for them because it's quite fun and playful, and I think energetically kind of aligns with their content. But yeah, I think where possible, like brand photography can be helpful, or if you are, a dab hand with a photograph, camera rather, then I mean, by all means experiment and kind of create your own style. The reason I got the brand photography was really because I'm just time poor, and it's
and then you've got them to
really
draw on.
and it's just sometimes even the photos, like if there's some I've not used before, sometimes the photo will give me inspiration for a piece of writing. Or for me, generally, when I am writing something, the photo's like the last thing to go on, and I can generally find something there quite quickly to add that fits with the kind of tone and style of the piece. And yeah, it just removes a whole headache for me, because I am the kind of person that when I didn't have brand photography, I could spend hours trying to take the perfect photo. I do struggle a bit with perfectionism. I think that's probably the way with a lot of people in the design profession anyway. So I do have to kind of like work hard to be a bit more relaxed about the choices that I make. And I think for anyone without photos that feels the same, like you say, Unsplash is a great option. But yeah, go beyond the kind of most popular image that comes up. Try and dig a little bit more deeply, and maybe look at less popular photographers on the platform, new ones to the Unsplash platform, and then you're going to find photos, as you say, that other people and other publications probably aren't using.
Yeah, no, it's a really good tip, Sarah. Yeah, and I totally get that, in terms of our own unique creative practice, just getting out of our own way. So that bit around, you've got your brand photos there, they're saved to your desktop, you can just pull from them, and you're not going to be second guessing, is this going to fit with the Substack? Is this going to fit when people receive the email to know it's from me? Because you already know all of that stuff works. Yeah, super, super helpful. I know that I've talked about it before in the podcast and in my classes, but one of the things that really helped me was starting a Pinterest board. And I know you advocate for that as well, because sometimes we don't know what we like and we don't know what we should be doing with different images. So I think just getting it all on Pinterest and then seeing where there are collections and groups of images that feel like, yes, that's me, and then getting rid of the ones that maybe that felt like me, but actually now we've moved in this direction. I think it's been really nice to just like narrow down the choices, and it's just such a brilliant search engine for that, isn't it, for design?
Oh yeah, yeah. I love using Pinterest and use it for all sorts. And when it comes to branding projects or working with clients on Substack, that's generally where we begin after we work through a branding questionnaire together. And the responses for that usually help me start a Pinterest board for a client, and then I invite them to it so that we can start refining things. So they'll go in and, like star all the things that they like and are drawn to, so we get rid of the other stuff. And then it is just a process over a week of two of kind of going back to it and just refining it more and more. Because I think for a lot of people, like, they might just go and pick one image and then get going with their Substack. I think having that kind of, couple of weeks of experimentation maybe before you start it isn't necessarily a bad thing, because it just helps you kind of pin down a style or a color palette, or, as you say, the kind of images that you might like to use. But yeah, I wrote a piece recently. I think it was for Russell Nolte's Substack, just about making a mood board. So I'm happy to send you a link to that. And
Oh
yeah,
yeah, that would be good. We could link that. And I did want to draw a little bit on your writing, because I know you've guest posted for Russell, my co-author of How to Build a World-Class Substack, and you've also guested for Emma Gannon as well, haven't you? So when you said, I wanted to explore myself as a writer and try something else outside of the branding work, I mean, you've definitely done that, Sarah. You've got your amazing Substack, but then you've done these collaboration posts as well, which I think is totally awesome. Could you talk a bit about that process and why you were drawn to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really just comes from like my own nature of being quite collaborative. I think because I've worked for myself for such a long time, I'm coming up to 20 years self-employed next year. And, you know, a lot of the time you can feel quite lonely, whether you're self-employed or you're working on your own creative practice as a writer, an artist, whatever background you're coming from. But I mean, it can feel quite isolating sometimes if you're not in that kind of group or team environment. So for me, I love collaborating with people. I love writing for other people. I like the challenge of maybe answering questions if it's like an interview post, or inviting other people to answer questions or write on a particular topic. Maybe I've seen them write about something that's really grabbed my attention. I think, that would be great for one of my series. I've got two on Substack. One is Notelets on Nurture. More recently, I brought my blog series over from my website, which was called This Creative Life. And yeah, I like to invite people to write for those. When it came to writing for other people, it was really just responding to opportunities to pitch. So with Emma, I think I'd just come to the end of a rejection challenge. So I did a 30-day rejection challenge last November. So yeah, coming up to a year since I did that. And that was inspired by a designer I know called Liz Mosley. Liz had challenged herself to do a kind of, I suppose, just, yeah, put herself out there. She got in touch with lots of different people. She set herself this task of getting 100 no's, and just to see how that would work out. I think she's halfway through her asks and had more kind of yeses than no's. So yeah, that was something that kind of inspired me. But I took a slightly different approach. I thought I'll just do the 30 asks, one a day throughout November, see what happens. So by the time I got to the end of that month, I had kind of like steeled myself against some of the no's, because there were a few. And then I saw Emma kind of just put a post out, or was it a note, I think, just saying, I'd like to invite a few people to guest for me when I'm away in January. So she was in Vietnam, and I just thought, I'm just going to go for it. And I had a topic idea in my head, which I felt kind of fitted quite well with some of the recent things Emma had explored around burnout. So yeah, I pitched a piece about creative rest, and I was really lucky to get a response from Emma that day saying, yep, I'll line you up for the 1st of January. So I was really chuffed. It was, yeah, I just felt really fortunate, but, I'd put myself in, I suppose, the right place at the right time, and just happened to suggest a topic that aligned quite well with her audience. And yeah, it gave me a real confidence boost, actually, because I don't think I was really expecting her to say yes. I think for me, it was more, I was just kind of continuing to exercise that muscle of, I'll just keep pitching and see what happens. And then around about that time, Russell had invited rather a few people to, yeah, share kind of guest pieces. And so I pitched the idea of doing a branding series. And so I just write a piece each quarter for him. So I'm coming up to doing my final piece for him soon on brand storytelling. Yeah, so it's been nice just to have that opportunity to write for someone else's community. And it's enabled other people to find me, but then it's meant that I've been able to discover other people as well who have been interested in branding and design. So yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Really nice to hear. And just for anybody listening who doesn't know, the size of audience, I think it is worth drawing on. I know Emma Gannon's over 30,000 subscribers. I'm not sure whereabouts she is, but it says publicly, how many subscribers. So it might be 35,000. And I think Russell is about 50,000 subscribers. So obviously you committing to doing something once a quarter is it's a really savvy move, because obviously there'll be new people coming into his ecosystem all the time. And then, like you say, people will resonate and come over and subscribe to your Substack, but also you might just have some nice chats in the comments and stuff like that. In 2023, I challenged myself to write a guest piece for somebody every single month. So I worked on the guest pieces in Susie Walker's writing hour. I've spoken about those writing hours a lot. And it was a really useful thing to do, because I got to know how to really sit and just craft something that worked for that person's audience. So looking at their website and online presence, their social media, trying to kind of make things fit. And I think I did ask for the first one, but all the rest just kind of flowed in. And so I just had a piece of collaborative content go out every single month last year. And it was a really, really nice and healing experience, because I've done a similar challenge to you, Sarah. I think it's on the wall here. It's called 100 submissions. And it's a similar concept by my friend Sarah Schatz. And the submissions were really around kind of having that artist hat on and doing gallery submissions and different things like that when she designed it. But I used it for funding submissions at this point in my career when I was actually really tired. Like, I'd done 20 years of funding submissions and the funding landscape was drying up. And what it gave me, I'm looking, I think it's okay, so it's 8. So I got to 8 funding submissions. 3 of them I got, and 5 I didn't, but there's nothing else filled in because I stopped doing
Mhm.
that process, make creative process, and putting myself out there in that way and working towards, okay, I'm going to do 100 of these, made me realize I don't want to do any more of these. So it can be the other way. It can be
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
like, okay, we've done this and we've flexed that muscle, like you say, but also we can discover things about the direction that we want to go when we start putting ourselves out there and kind of challenging ourselves, because it's very easy to stay comfortable. It's very easy to just be like, okay, well, I'll do this. I know what I'm doing with this. But as soon as we start collaborating or writing guest pieces, for me, it felt a very sharp learning curve. And then led to lots more opportunities as well. I think once
yeah.
people see that you'll guest for somebody, then that seemed to be what happened with me. Then they would ask me to guest for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've got a few kind of guesting opportunities that have come up recently, and so snap them up mainly because it gives me an opportunity to not just share the work that I'm doing through brand seasons, but I've got my own Kickstarter, and so just being able to have the opportunity to put that project in front of other people is great. Um, it's interesting you say about kind of like stopping at a certain point when you were going through that kind of submissions challenge, because for me, what I learned really quickly is that I actually didn't want to do as much writing for other people as I thought I did. I almost
Mm.
overdid it at
Mhm.
the beginning of this year, I think, in terms of some of the writing opportunities that came up, because I was doing some work for magazines as well out with Substack. Really enjoyed some of that, but also because it was deadline driven, just felt it wasn't really suiting me, particularly when I was working 2 days a week, having just come back from maternity leave. I think I challenged myself a little bit too much. Um, what was interesting to me was how much I actually enjoyed the podcasting opportunities. So until last year, I'd maybe been on a few podcasts, and then this year have had a lot more interviews, mainly because, well, I started my own podcast, which is something I never thought I would do, but really felt called to in the last few years. And yeah, finally got that off the ground in the spring. But then with the challenge that I did, I'd say like 10 of the opportunities I went for were podcast related, 10 were kind of media magazine related, and then 10 were on Substack. And what was quite interesting is that there were certain ones I just felt called to keep going for, and so the podcast one kind of fitted into that, which yeah, it's been good actually. I've really enjoyed kind of chatting about different topics on different shows, and yeah, it's just kind of opened up a whole new world to me, because I'm not somebody who has ever really been that visible online. Um, I've tended to just kind of work quite quietly on my business in the background, and most of the collaboration has been in kind of written form. So yeah, this is a bit different for me, but yeah,
There's something very live, isn't there, about speaking to somebody for a podcast. I think lent into that as well. And through promoting the book, I realized that the podcast slash workshop opportunities were the ones that were bringing the most audience into my space and pushing
mhm,
sales through the most, which, because it was all very intense and I was doing it all at the same time, it was like, oh, there's something here that is human to human, that is in that kind of, it's likability, but it's also understanding what somebody's about, like the essence of that humanity in a person. And I think
yeah,
some of the questions that I got asked, I'd never answered any questions like that. I'd never asked myself those questions. So that was just an interesting human experience, right? So yeah, I think confidence can grow. I think that's part of the arc of this story, that confidence can grow by putting yourself out there and trying things. You get to know yourself more, you get to know your creative practice more, you try new things and you lean in. So super interesting to hear. And I do want to touch on the Kickstarter because that is running currently. So we're going to get this podcast straight out so people can hear more about it. So tell us about your Brand Seasons play deck, Sarah. It sounds so exciting.
yeah. So the play deck is really a culmination of years of experience in branding. when I approach my work, I've always kind of divided it into kind of like strategy, styling, and storytelling as the kind of core areas that I work with clients on. Interestingly, in the development of the card deck, which covers those areas, I also developed a fourth, which is substance. So it's basically bringing all of those three together. And the substance thing kind of works really well because it really does tie in with that whole ethos of crafting a brand that feels like home. It's really like you've kind of got those nuts and bolts in place, but I also think it's important to have an element of relaxation around it, and that things can move, you can shift and shape things. So it's not finished, essentially, and it can keep moving and growing and changing. But the card deck really is just an opportunity for people to play with branding. I think it's something that people hear the word brand and immediately think, corporate or intimidating, or, it's something that's maybe not for them. And yeah, I really want to challenge that idea and just make it something playful for people and more accessible and sustainable. And yeah, so the card deck is divided into these four areas, of strategy, style, story, and substance. And each of those also aligns with a season. So I developed the brand seasons method, which helps clients in my mentoring practice move through the seasons of sowing, blossoming, harvesting, and grinding. And they just really nicely align with those branding areas as well. And yeah, I felt by kind of wrapping it all up together that way in a little product, it would just make it feel more doable for people. Um, and yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. Like even little things like yesterday, I tried a card pull on Instagram stories, and I got such great interaction from it. And I thought, I'm just going to do a card pull every week with the deck on Substack and on Instagram and just kind of see how that lands. So yeah, it's opening up new opportunities for me as well and ways of connecting with people. But yeah, the deck is, a project that's been on my mind for a while. And it's interesting because when I started the Brand Seasons publication on Substack, I knew then that my intention was to work towards creating this deck of cards. At the time, I really just talked about a product and it was a little bit more of a woolly concept. But over the last almost 18 months now of being on the platform, it's really helped me to kind of solidify that vision, gain the clarity that I needed to produce the deck. To support the card deck, I've also produced a little mini zine, but then that's almost like a little kind of um, yeah, a little opportunity of its own, really. But I wanted to kind of have the two together because not everybody will want to say back the card deck, but they might be interested in the paper. And that covers a little bit of branding and business, but there's also kind of creativity and seasonality, quite a few interviews, articles, essays within that. Um, I've kind of described it as like Substack on a Saturday morning. For me, that's when I like to catch up on things over my cuppa. And I kind of wanted the magazine, this sort of mini zine thing, to have that vibe. So yeah, that's been quite a fun thing to introduce alongside it. And yeah, just give people another opportunity to support the Kickstarter, really.
Oh, it
Um,
sounds so good. I'm a huge fan of a physical product. I love a physical product. I feel like pandemic-y sort of years on Instagram was like that pull to like, I want to make something. I want to make something that I send through the post to people that just feels really exciting. And with the Kickstarter books, I actually wanted to send out the UK ones, even though that's a lot of work. And even though Russell had fulfillment houses all over the world that could have done that, I wanted to do that. I wanted to put the postcard in. I wanted to handwrite the addresses on them. Like there's something that really I think is very grounding around closing the laptop and just picking up a physical product and going back to kind of note-based, interactions with something that helps prompt and helps guide. And I love the way that you describe like those 4 pillars and that way of kind of getting into some of the questions that can feel quite complicated. I think sometimes within the creative process, people get so stuck, confused, or bored that they'll just put something out there and they'll be like, well, that'll do, and this is inviting us to kind of take a little bit more time to see it as a living, breathing thing that we can work with over time. So I think it could be a brilliant complement to people with their Substacks. If people are coming to Substack and
Yeah.
they don't have another online presence like a website, or they haven't really branded up social media, this could be a really beautiful invitation and very affordable
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, so I've got a deck here.
Oh, lovely. Let's have a look. I mean, I've seen some photos. I feel it's very, what do I want to
Yeah,
say? It feels really like it would be a beautiful thing to hold. It feels
yeah.
exuberant
So
and
it's a
tiny.
letterpress.
Okay.
We're still experimenting a little bit with some of the stocks for it, but
Hmm.
yeah, this is the prototype. Got a few prototypes made up, and yeah, there's a little kind of
See it slide
mini.
there, guys. Look at that. Oh, look at this, a little booklet.
So, yeah. And I've got a
Beautiful.
little QR code there. So what I've done with the card deck is, I wanted it to be its own kind of analog thing so people can just be offline with it. But if you do want to go a little bit deeper, with the card deck, you've got kind of like opportunities to do that. In fact, I will just quickly flick through and see if I can find. Yeah, so there's a wee bit at the bottom of that one, which shows you there's like a download that you can access. So basically, there's 12 downloads, 3 for each of the seasons and pillars of branding, where you can just go a little bit deeper. So this one is to do with kind of brand essence and nature. Sorry, I'm getting the hang of kind of like where this
Yeah, it's
is.
all
I'm
good.
opposite. But yeah, it's to do with brand essence, kind of getting into the nature of your brand, the character, its qualities. And what I've done is add a prompt to each one so you can kind of journal on it. So this one is, what innate qualities define your brand? How does its character shine through? So people can kind of journal on that. Or there's a practice where you can go a little bit deeper. And then on some of the cards, as I say, there's a download where you can go even wider on the topic. This kind of mirrors what my paid Substacks subscribers have experienced in some ways, because what I've been doing this year is sharing resources on a quarterly basis. So in the spring, we focused on strategy, summer was styling, autumn we're now going into storytelling, and then over the winter we'll look at kind of substance and tying all the pieces together. And if you back the deck, you'll get free 6 months in the membership. So
Oh.
that's something that I have actually announced, but need to talk a little bit more about. I decided when I got to certain points within the Kickstarter campaign, I'm just at the time of recording almost halfway through, and decided that when we hit certain goals, like 25%, I said, right, anyone who backs the deck will get 6 months membership to my Substack, because I think for me, it just adds another layer to the whole experience of using the deck. And I'm in there once a month. I open up the chat thread to people and ask if they've got a particular question or a challenge they might be experiencing with branding or their publication. And yeah, it's just a space for you, for people to, yeah, be able to explore those sorts of things in more detail. And I think just get answers to the questions that they might be ruminating over, because I know I'm certainly the type of person that dwells on things for a bit too long. If I got out there and just asked the questions,
Mm-hmm.
then I'd be able to arrive at that end point sooner. So yeah, so I feel like Substack is kind of like the base of all this for me. It's where it all kind of started, and it gave me that space to kind of explore how the deck would work, And at the time, I didn't even know it would be called a play deck, you know, but it's kind of grown arms and legs as these things do. And it's been a fun project to work on. And I think I'm just over 30% funded now. So I'm hopeful that in the second half things will ramp up a little bit. We shall see.
I think it's that thing, isn't it, of repeating messages and getting people more excited. And this kind of hybrid that you've got, where we've got that connection to online, we've got that connection to that offer. What I feel about your Substack publication as a paid member is you're never asking me to do work, you know, like you're not asking me to like show up and graft. You're just saying, do you want to think about this? And I always do. You know, it's like, oh, yes, I do. Like, I really appreciate that prompt and I really appreciate the spaciousness. So sometimes I think where we've got to with paid subscriptions on Substack is I can't take on any more reading. I can't take on any more paid memberships or paying for any more Substacks. Just there's a financial implication for sure, but there's a capacity implication. And I feel like with yours, it's been so gentle and so needed to be able to just have those gentle prompts, connect in, like give that some thought and know that you know, branding up and storytelling and styling it's a lifelong connection, right? It's a lifelong
Mhm.
connection to how you display and you work in the world. So I really appreciate it, Sarah. And I think that the play deck is a brilliant idea. I can imagine it in home offices of creatives up and down the country. I don't know whether you've got international shipping as well, have you? Can people, because I get a lot of American listeners and Canadian folks and stuff. Can
Yeah.
everybody buy it?
Yeah. Some of my first backers were from the US, and it was so
Yay!
encouraging to see people
Mhm.
pledge that I didn't know. So I think the first, like, you know, you build up that, you do go through that kind of pre-launch phase, and a lot of the initial pledges were from my business friends, people who have seen me kind of develop this over the last 18 months or so. But yeah, quite a few backers from the US, Canada, Australia. So yeah, I'm shipping all over UK, EU, internationally.
Oh,
So yeah,
perfect.
don't let that hold you back.
And
So
if people are listening in the future, so you can let us know the deadline for backing the Kickstarter. But if people are finding this episode in the future, will there be a way, do you think, for them to buy the play deck, or have you not decided yet?
I think so, yeah. I mean, my intention, if I can get the project funded, is to have an online shop within my website so people are able to buy the deck there. I'd also like to gift it to clients that work with me on kind of branding projects. So for me, it's quite a nice kind of like client gift as well. And yeah, an opportunity just for people to connect with branding a little bit differently. Um, of course, it all depends on getting the project funded. But yeah, I think that's probably the route I'll go down. I've got no plans at the moment for it to say go into shops and become available as a product in that way. I think it's very much a kind of like self-publishing thing, much like the mini zine as well. So for me, as with a lot of these things, an experiment. But yeah, we'll just kind of see how it plays out. But certainly, if you're really keen to get your hands on the deck, I would say back it if you can, because for me, I'm not sure what I'll do beyond the Kickstarter. Just relying on getting to that end point right now. But yeah, it ends 2 weeks tomorrow, I think. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So on a Wednesday in a couple of weeks'
Wednesday, the
time. Yeah.
23rd at
Wednesday, 23rd.
8
Great.
p.m.
Okay.
UK time.
Yeah.
um, yeah.
Well, if you're listening in real time and you can support Sarah with shares on Substack, shares on Instagram, shares of the imaging and the Kickstarter link, that would be obviously so appreciated. I think it's so brilliant that it's this combination of having something physical to hold and connecting to you in other ways, like through the membership and the downloads. I think it's genius. And I know that it's going to help so many people to just get out of their own way and craft something that's really beautiful, because branding can look ugly. Like I have seen some ugly brands out there, you know, and it's fine, isn't it? It's all subjective, but I do
Mm,
think we can mess it up quite easily by not knowing some of the principles of
yeah.
what's going to work together and stuff. So it can be a real help, and it can just really uplift your Substack, and it can uplift what you're doing across the internet really, and give you more confidence to kind of stand behind it. So I'm a big fan of Sarah's work, as you can probably tell, and I'm really rooting for her to get this crowdfunder, this Kickstarter, all fully funded. So fingers crossed, I'll be keeping a close eye. But thank you so much, Sarah, for being here. It's been super insightful to speak to you and understand more about your creative process and the work that you're doing and offering in the world as well outside of Substack. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. No, I've liked the opportunity to chat a bit more, to see you again.
Yeah,
Um,
it's been nice.
and yeah, it's been like, chatting over the coffee.
I
That's
know
nice.
it's been really lovely. I've had a few interruptions from my puppy, who was very inquisitive about why I'd closed the door in the cupboard. So some of you
Oh,
watching on video will have seen that, but hopefully the audio is all good. So if people want to circle back and find you online, where should people connect with you, Sarah?
so on Substack, as I said, I'm at Brand Seasons. Over on Instagram, my handle is at thesearethedays.co. I'm also on Pinterest at thesearethedays.co, and my website is thesearethedays.co. So yeah, keeping it quite simple. Yeah. So love to
Beautiful.
connect with your community. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
beautiful. Thank you again, Sarah. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you really soon.